Okay. Schism. Horrible sounding word. In here, new notepad started today. Stolen. Our whole way of life. Now that's a grand statement. I mean, the most important statement of all is that anybody who stays in Britain, if they're a thoughtful person, balanced, philosophical, that's my code word, thoughtful. It's the best word. Just a thoughtful person. We used to say right thinking people like 20, 30 years ago, and that was a good way of putting it. It's not exclusive in any way. It's like right thinking people means preventing what even here in a little town in the marches, the middle of nowhere, and I really have to do two things at the same time. But one day will end soon. In fact, I know when it's got to end. The 20th anniversary. Got to get the date. What right thinking people means is actually looking after people, having a society where through a far fairer, more egalitarian system, any society that has a massive disparity top and bottom has always been unstable. And yet what's happened in the last 10 to 20 years? We've just become, this disparity has become more and more extreme. Now, so what? For me. Because I actually, personally, would not have my life any other way. Because there is no point staying in Britain in that, even in this very small town. It's got about 10 shops in the high street, kind of middle of nowhere. Half an hour ago, there's a guy in there at the tills going berserk. The rage, this mad, kind of slightly druggy probably, or up all night. I mean, quite a tall guy, 40, 45. One can encounter this anywhere now, even here. And the point is, right-thinking people were concerned, wrong word, were busied themselves thinking about how does the modern secular post-enlightenment, thank God from the 50s we no longer gauge everything by this dreadful religion called Christianity, which has become only self-obsessed. How do we organize communities and society such that it's safe and decent and does not produce endless people in rage? Okay, mentally ill, but most mental illness was always preventable if you retain good attachments, have little angst around children when they're young. If you do your best, if society does its best to maintain good, sustained, long-term attachments that provides examples and nicer older people who are just guiding youngsters. No, it's all just become about my sharp elbows. It did 10 years ago. Right, now I'm sounding like a complete and utter prat, okay? And I'm not actually interested in today or anything except one thing from the 1st of January this year. One thing. It's quite simple. You can't say anything in so delicately unbalanced societies unless you've got your back covered. I'm talking about permanently, long term. It's about having an ally. And that generally means somebody of the opposite sex. I mean, let's just, I've no interest in woke politics, sexual politics, any of these things, because bizarrely they haven't actually changed very much. I was listening 4 or 5 weeks ago, the evening PM slot, I think it was, when Evan Davis, who makes a big thing about being homosexual, oh no, of course he doesn't make a big thing, but you can tell that I mean, the amount of gender politics stories he does, it's all about trans this and this, that and the other. It was actually funny when he was announcing the findings from the first census ever that I think it was a year ago, that spoke of, asked people what their sexual persuasion is. And he actually almost said the words, I think he did say the words, like, we were expecting it to be 10% who were non-heterosexual. Nope. It's 96.5% or 4% to be accurate and fair. Did not tick the boxes saying they're homosexual or transgender or whatever the huge rainbow colour of other varieties are. That means your ally through life has to be somebody, doesn't have to be, of course, but no, the person who, if you're doing things in society and you are doing truth to power, you may have issues with power. Power may come and try and cause you problems. They do it in all kinds of weird ways for the last 10 or 20 years in Britain. But that means you need somebody at home. If you've got an animal, you might get carted off. They might try and cause you issues. I mean, I'm so constant. This is always my mood and tone. But I know what it's like when they subtly attack you, the authority system. I've no interest. I will never, ever be attacking authority, ever, again, because you cannot get, or it's very, very difficult to get a reliable, permanent, like, committed ally. There we go. Why have I put the camera on? Because if even here you can't be guaranteed, unless of course there's some extreme situation of just peaceful existence, anybody who has the option over the next few years to relocate to a different country that doesn't, most of the time it may be necessary to keep a foothold here. I pity them. If they can't face the facts that we are so angsty, lost, it's not going to just change. Anyway, as I gradually leave this society, I will just be leaving behind great stories that demonstrate what I'm talking about. This is my will, by the way, and I may go on making this will for 20 years. I have enough stories chronicled properly, real ones, the last decade, 13 years actually, for a lifetime. And I actually quite enjoy it. I never go back into my chronicle, which is all sorts of bits of just working draft film and many audio recordings. I never go back in because I don't need to. I'm interested in what's happening now. But the schism in my life is I knew, it's not my life, I know there's no point. There is no point caring about the river here. There is no point anymore. The people who were the right thinking people are so distracted, fearful, and not committed, because committed means long term, and incapable of having allies, which means, I mean, one of my best stories ever, although this is not the kind of story I'm going to be doing, one of my best stories ever was I was running, leading almost by accident a justice movement in the late tens. No, double O's. And you need allies. You need people who are on the same page as you. And there was a chap who, a working class man who had the same issues, sort of. And he didn't have an education, but he taught himself amazingly to be a true expert of building websites and having them always on page one of Google. And his websites were connected with justice. And if you put in a term to Google then, like social services and that kind of thing, there'd be 10 million hits. His website would always be on page one. We were allies on the same, very much solidarity for a period. But then, as always happens, because this man he actually had OCD and he was a very angry man. He'd actually been years ago in a bookstore, actually, but he was a pretty good man. But deep down, he did have anger issues and never went out in the countryside, by the way, which is often the cure to them. Anyway, him and it wasn't me, he cracked one day, and he was very unpleasant. Didn't see him that often. And he angrily backed out. He hardly had any allies at all. I don't think anybody had ever actually been to his kitchen where he worked from. I had. I'd even taken my kid there. So he cracked one day and got aggressive and angsty. But then, gradually, slowly, over the coming month or two, just a little bit of reconnection occurred. And when we did properly resume our communication, regularly on the telephone, some emailing stuff and some face-to-face, when we resumed, although he could never say it, and this is the sad thing, this is what emotional intelligence is, one has to be terribly careful. He could never say, hey man, it's good that we had our little fizz, which was a phony war. There was never a war. We fizzed, got angry, but then gradually we've come back, we've made up in a more actually mature way post the phony schism. And that's what allies then become. You will go through periods with anybody, a male ally, a female ally, a partner. You will go through a period of fizz, and then you'll hopefully come back. But you see, the problem is that virtually everybody now, it's this instant gratification, but there seems to be an instant gratification in the schism. No, that's it. I don't like what you said there. I don't like this. That's it. Now, that's against the rules of the last 5,000 years. Let's assume that civilization began, well, it actually probably began 30, 40,000 years ago. But that's against the rules of humanity. It's no good. It's just no good. Anyway, there we go.